Okay, today is July 3rd, 2024. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline, special Stampede edition of The Pipeline. I'm joined, as always, by Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
Hello again.
Nigel actually did not dress for Stampede. He just kindly removed his tie so the rest of us didn't look like total schmucks.
This is my Trudeau impression.
Yeah, you got the sleeves.
Yeah.
You got to do a dance.
The whole thing.
You got to do a dance.
Yep.
Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
Howdy, partner.
Who did get the memo. No, he wasn't in the office yesterday. He got the memo. You just did that yourself, didn't you?
No, I got a memo from Nico, actually.
Oh, okay.
He gave me a heads up.
Okay, good. All right, well, today is not very Western or Alberta focused. We're zooming out today. The closest we'll get is Ottawa. That'll be the closest to home. Today is, there's a pretty common theme about some politicians circling the drain, so to speak. I try not to follow U.S. politics too closely, but God, I was out at the family cabin in the woods, and I started, we got a decent phone signal there now. I just started seeing clips of the U.S. presidential debate, and I just had to watch it. Holy crap! This might go down as possibly the most consequential U.S. Presidential debate in history. Donald Trump versus, some drooling old man that they pushed on the stage. So we're going to talk about the U.S. presidential debate and the continuing fallout for who will, in fact, be the Democratic nominee for president. Apparently not the sitting Democratic president who has won the primaries. And speaking of circling the drain, Justin Trudeau, the continuing fallout from the Toronto-St. Paul's by-election, a riding Conservatives had no business winning it. And the crisis this has created now finally, Justin Trudeau's had the country in crisis for years, but now finally the Liberal Party has been plunged into crisis as they similarly look around and find that the leader of their party does not seem to be a winner at this moment. And compounding this, which should be a screaming national scandal, but really just hasn't got the attention because, I think Canadians become kind of almost immune to Trudeau's scandal at this point. But Trudeau's defense minister at the time, Narjit Sajjan, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Very significant scandal emerging now as we find that when he was Trudeau's defense minister and Afghanistan was falling to the Taliban, he diverted Canadian forces' resources away from rescuing Canadians and Canadian allies, people who had served the Canadian forces, people like translators, away from their duty and towards rescuing Sikhs. Now, this is obviously nothing against Sikhs, but these were just Sikhs who are in Afghanistan. Probably won't fare too well under the rule of someone like the Taliban, but these were not Canadians and Canadian allied assets who had served the Canadian forces, and as a result, people died. People died as a result of this. And it's now emerging that this all happened while certain Sikh organizations were donating to his campaign at that very moment. Not a good look. So, okay, we're going to zoom it back out, and we're going to start with the U.S. presidential debate. I'm sure you've all seen clips of it by now. If you have the internet, it's impossible not to see, frankly, this poor old man who is being abused by at least someone in his inner circle to stay in power. Nico, why don't we just show some of the top highlights there of the Trump-Biden debate and what went down.
Making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
If you're a Trump fan, you're just licking your lips. You don't get any better. But God, there's a part of me that just feels bad for this old man who's been trotted out. Okay, we'll get to the media reaction and the DNC reaction and talk of replacing him as candidate in a bit. But just, we'll start off, Nigel, here with the debate performance. I mean, obviously, I don't know what analogy to use. Trainwreck, Hindenburg, none of them seem to do justice to how much of a catastrophe this was to the Biden campaign.
Well, of course it was. And the thing is, it was foreseeable. And that leads to a whole area.
Well, we're going to get to that part. We'll talk just the debate itself for now. We'll get to all that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I thought Mr. Trump handled it brilliantly by not making it any worse for Biden. The optics of Mr. Trump just beating up on this poor old man who's, he looked white and pallid.
Well, he looked orange a few days later.
Well, he spray can of that tan stuff does wonders, I'm told. But at the time that we're talking about, which is the debate, he was looking tired. He was sort of white in that kind of elderly old man look that you have. And he couldn't form his words. The clip that we've just watched, where he starts off and then just goes into complete balderdash, is painful. And it makes you wonder why anybody would have put him through that. The other thing that I noticed about his style was that he had clearly been prepped. I understand they took him away for a week.
Six days of prep for this debate.
6 days.
No one's ever been so well prepared for a debate.
And, every question that came up, he would say, 3 points. And he would lead off for the first one, get mixed up on the second one, and forget the third one entirely. And obviously, somebody had been saying, all right, sir, when they ask you about this, these are the three things you need to, these are the talking points. And he couldn't do it under the most favorable conditions imaginable. And with all that preparation, it was just sad.
Cory, just we're going to get to why this happened and the fallout and everything in a moment, but just your
I watched, and I saw it popping up. It was impulsive. Oh, well, what the heck? We'll kick back and watch this. I'm going to watch two men that I really don't care much for either of them. I'm not a Trump fan. And I know we'll get all the feedback from the viewers. Get over it. I don't like the but I expected those two to go at each other, and it was just going to be more of the same, and we'll see both sides will declare a victory. 15 minutes in, I mean, as is my wont, I live tweet. One of my tweets I throw is there a mercy rule? Like, there's 70 minutes left in this thing, and that I don't know if I can watch this much more. He was really that far in decline. To his credit, I mean, it was both strategic and I think hopefully showing a bit of sign in a character that a man typically doesn't show much mercy for others. Trump did just kind of sit back and let Biden take care of himself, because, had he just been in and poking or beating on him, I mean, Trump was still being his usual blowhard self, but he laid off on
it was calm
anything
for Trump.
Yes.
For Trump, it was toned down.
Yeah, so...
I think there might have been a bit of speech prep in the Trump camp. Listen, he's not going to do well. Don't go for the throat.
I don't know if even he expected it to go that badly. I looked at a little bit of his smirk as he watched it, like, wow. But, Trump's not a fool, whatever he is, and he's just realizing, well, just let this go. Like, this is taking care of it on my behalf. But it was just a terrible performance, a mismatch of people with cognitive ability that you really did. And I'm not a fan of Biden, but you felt sorry for the man in that situation.
So the most fascinating part of it to me was immediately after the debate, the hours and 24 hours after the debate, when all of the kind of left Democratic aligned media all of a sudden were shocked. Oh my God, Biden's so old. Biden's senile. We never knew this. We clearly need a new candidate. I mean, it's either massive self-delusion on the part of all these people, on the part of all, MSNBC, CNN types, Democratic pundits. it was either mass self-delusion or they were lying. And I generally try to be charitable towards those I disagree with, but it has been painfully obvious for at a minimum 2 years, probably going on at least 3. I mean, he was already pretty slow and stuff in the 2020 presidential election, but he could plausibly be able to hold it together. For 2 years now, it has been painfully obvious that this man is just not there anymore. This is not the Joe Biden. Even if you're a big Joe Biden fan, this is not the Joe Biden you knew. This is not your father's Joe Biden. This is your great-grandfather's Joe Biden.
He's been around that long, too.
Yeah, I mean, this man has been a senator longer than I've been alive. And I'm starting to feel old. But this man has been a senator longer than I've been alive. And they've all acted as if age and cognitive ability is not fair grounds, and it's somehow prejudice towards this man and elderly people. But in the 1984 U.S. presidential debate election, it was fair grounds because Ronald Reagan was how old? 73?
73.
73 or so. And at the time, that was the oldest man to ever be running for president. And he's running for a second term. And it was an issue, and it was fair game. Let's roll the clip from that very unforgettable clip from the 1984 presidential debate between Ronald Reagan and Mondale, where this was an issue, and Ronald Reagan's unforgettable response.
Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience. If I still have time, I might add, Mr. Truitt, I might add that it was Seneca or it was Cicero, I don't know which, that said, if it was not for the elders correcting the mistakes of the young, there would be no state.
Okay, so when you've got the moderator and your opponent keeled over on laughter, you know you've won. You've won.
Point to Reagan for that.
Yeah, I mean, like the 1984 was never really in doubt, but I think any issue, especially around his ability to do the job as an elderly man, was put to bed right there. But to be fair, even in his very last years, Ronald Reagan did slow down and he stepped back from the public light. Nancy Reagan, the first lady, kind of stepped in, made some of the decisions, but that was not obvious running for president. He was clearly sharp enough to have a retort like that. It was fine. This is not. The Democrats are now pretending to be shocked by this, and I think they thought they could muddle through it. What's different with this debate, what they did actually realize was he can't muddle through it. We're going to lose if this man is at the top of the Democratic ticket. Cory.
I can only assume, like, behind closed doors, the people around him, dementia, it's a difficult disease. I mean, it hits some people in their late 50s. Other people can get in their 90s and they're still sharp as a tack. You don't know who it's going to hit. Sometimes it comes in waves. The person has good days, they have bad days. But when you look, the most telling things are people showing Biden 4 years ago and putting it next to where he is today. This has been progressing for a while. People close to him, people behind closed doors knew how bad it's been getting. I mean, maybe they were crossing their fingers hoping it was going to be a good night rather than a bad one. But I think along the lines of others are saying they realized we're up the creek, but the only way we can pull the pin on this and kind of pull a mercy rule and quickly get a new candidate in by the convention is to show not only the Republicans, but the Democrats, he just can't do it anymore. It's an emergency. So putting him on the stage like that was their most clear way to do it. And I think it was tactical.
So Nigel, you and I, we chatted earlier this morning in the newsroom about this. I mean, I'm pretty good with not being in the tinfoil hat crowd, but you can't help but see pretty strong signs that Biden was set up for this.
Yes.
By people, not just in the DNC, but probably in his pretty close inner circle. That, because previous to this debate, the earliest U.S. presidential debate ever was in September. This is 3 months earlier than the previous earliest debate. And the DNC was pushing for an early debate. Now, they got very favorable rules. They got CNN to host it, fairly favorable moderators. Although they didn't do a terrible job, but fairly favorable moderators. Mic's cut so that you can't really interrupt. I think that puts a huge disadvantage on Trump, who, with Hillary Clinton, he says, because you'd be in jail, like little one-liners like that he's good at, that sting. None of that. They got favorable rules, but still they had this early debate. And I can't help but think that they wanted this pre-convention so they can nominate someone else. And, the thinking would be, why didn't the power brokers in the Democratic Party do this or talk to him earlier so we could leave with a little more dignity than he's being pushed out right now? And I got to think it's because, the kind of crony capitalist establishment of the Democratic Party, they're afraid of an open primary because the radical left could win in its own right. They could elect someone from the kind of the AOC wing, and that would make the Democrats unelectable. Also, crony capitalists there to at least be some capitalism for the cronyism to work. So that doesn't work with the far left either. So they wanted a Biden type, but they needed to wait until after the primaries are done, but before he's nominated. It sure just looks like this is a setup for the power brokers to bring in someone that they've probably already got in mind, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you've got a pretty fair summary of the whole thing there, Derek. Certainly, to take you back to your earlier point about the media, if you only watched what we refer to as the mainstream media, the MSNBC, the ABC, the CBS, those guys, then you would have only had a very sheltered portrait of Joe Biden in the time of his presidency. If you were a Fox News watcher, you would have almost seen an excess of Biden falls and fails and times when he misspoke himself, almost to the point where you started to disapprove of it. It's one thing to say, okay, this is the problem with the guy, but I don't want to see quite that much of it. I don't want to see so much exultation over his failings. But the truth was out there, thanks to Fox News, if you cared to look. The other place where the truth was in the immediate circle around the man in the White House.
They knew better.
They saw him every day. They saw him fumbling and stumbling, and we don't know how much worse they have seen than we have seen in the privacy of their own private quarters. Who knows? So they knew darn well what they were going to get when they put him out there. So the question was only ever going to be, do we do it in June or do we do it in September? And if we do it in September, we're kind of stuck with him. And if we do it in June, oh my goodness, everybody will clutch their pearls and say, well, this man can't possibly carry on as president. And it'll be relatively easy. We don't have to win the argument. We've just done it by default. That is probably one of the cruelest tricks of politics that I have seen, in the last 20 years, maybe in my whole time of reporting, short of actually assassinating someone, to actually destroy their reputation and their character, and to just say, well, he's a bumbling old fool and we get him off. I have no use for the man's policies. I don't know him, so I can't talk about him in that way. But what we know about Joe Biden is nothing to support, but that was still a vicious, cruel way to push him off the stage.
Well, intramural politics are always the most vicious. What most people see is they see the intra-party politics. They see conservative and liberal and New Democrat. They see, Democrat Party, Republican Party. Most people don't see inside.
The inside stuff's the ugly.
That is where it's always the ugliest.
That actually sparks a Churchill quote. Apparently, a young MP tapped Churchill on the shoulder and asked him about the people on the other side of the bench, the enemy. And he corrected him. He said, no, sir, those are not your enemy. They're your opponents. Your enemies are over here on our side. So it would appear to be in the Democrat Party today.
Well, No doubt it is within every
the
political
Republicans
party.
as well.
Every
right?
political party, your enemies are actually on your own side. Your other side are your opponents. The guys who could really get you, the guys who can put a knife between the ribs, they got to get close and they got to be quiet to do it. And someone's done it to Joe Biden here. And if I was a Democrat, I mean, yeah, I've got no time for his politics either, but Democrats like the guy. You know, he has served in the Senate since the 70s. Since the bloody 70s, he's done his time, and to send him out like this, I mean, like
something else beyond this, though, beyond getting another candidate. I mean, he's still technically, even if he didn't run again, could be president until January of next year.
Yeah,
this is going to prompt possibly an invocation of the 25th. And then suddenly you get President Kamala for the last bit of the term. So, there's a lot more to this,
for
too,
those
than
of you
just
at home
changing
who
the
do not
candidate.
know what the 25th Amendment is, that's the ability of the cabinet to essentially remove the president if he's incapacitated or unable to serve. And there's the Speaker of the House actually just called on the cabinet to do it. I think it was just yesterday. It's not just like that's another question the Democrats will have to answer now. If he's not fit to run for president, he can't be fit to be president. Yeah. And, you know, there's still half a year to go. And, I mean, from all appearances, the guy, I mean, if something goes on, can he even find the Situation Room in the White House? I mean, obviously someone's going to lead him there. If he said, meet us in the Situation Room, he'll probably end up in a, you know, janitor's closet or something. At this point.
They didn't just expose a president, a candidate in serious decline. They exposed a president in serious decline, and they've got to look at that as well now.
So now you've got the conventions come up in the summer here. So wait, when is it again?
I think it's August 24th. I could be off.
It's normally in the back end of the summer. Normally they're just kind of a fairly pro forma affair. They, you know, someone stands behind, you know, people stand with these big signs for their state and they do a roll call. They formally nominate the president. The president gives a big speech. The only news is normally who they announce the vice presidential candidates. That's it. But the Democratic one could be very different. Now, you could have the convention increasingly likely looking like the convention is going to pick it. But all of these candidates, so all the delegates of this convention, they're all, well, not all, but they're overwhelmingly Biden delegates. So they're going to be a part of the Democratic establishment. There'll be a ton of horse trading like we've never seen before.
It's already happening.
It's already happening. Obviously, Kamala Harris is probably deeply wounded that very few people are talking. She's the vice president, and everyone's like, no, not her. But there is at least one major compelling reason to pick her is money. The Democrats have raised a lot of money for the presidential campaign, and from at least what I've read from experts in the States, the money raised for the presidential campaign can only be used by people who are on that ticket. So only if she's on the ticket. Now, perhaps they'd be able to find a way if they keep her as the VP, keep her at the bottom of the ticket. Maybe they keep that in there. I mean, man, that'd be a slap in the face to just stay at the bottom of the ticket with a new person.
Then it's truly a meal ticket.
Yeah, it would just clearly be about the money at that point. But that's not an insignificant consideration. But I don't know, Nigel. How likely does it seem to you that they're going to switch Biden out? Like, because Jill Biden, I haven't paid that much attention to her, but boy, she sure looks like she enjoys being first lady a lot right now.
Yeah, also she doesn't want Hunter coming home to live with them. So she's an interesting character and one who's been very much underreported. I think she's putting herself out there now. I don't actually subscribe to the Lady Macbeth interpretation of Joe Biden. I actually think she cares about the man and is trying to support him in any way that she could. She comes across as if she's trying to run things, but actually...
But she might be running things at this point.
She might be running things.
Like Nancy Reagan was running the White House in the last year and a half.
But nevertheless... I actually think she comes across as somebody who cares about the man. I could be wrong, but you ask. That's where I am with Joe Biden. But as for Joe, this is what we're looking at now, is a time of max danger. If you were hostile to the United States, if you were, shall we say, a major Far Eastern superpower with eyes on an island just off your coast,
be a good time.
This would be an awfully good time.
Oh, just wait till after 4 o'clock.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because that was one of the excuses offered up by the White Houses. Well, he's good before 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
So we wait till 4:30, and then you land the landing craft.
Does he seem to have a cold? So there's a lot of things that could happen before January the 6th, or is it going to be the 7th next year? That could require somebody in control. And after the president, there's a vice president, and then the Speaker of the House, all of them, there are people there who are capable of making decisions, even if the president isn't. And they are supported by a senior level of military officers. If we're talking about a war situation, they're not going to be short of advice, and there will be somebody to make a decision. But how well does the other side understand that? The answer is probably somewhat, but it's still so awfully tempting. The seconds count in those situations. Mm-hmm. So I actually, Naylor's desk is going to be busy this summer.
Cory, Kamala Harris is extremely unpopular, but she's clearly making a play for the top of the ticket right now. You can tell her social media is just full of this crazy, cringe-worthy stuff at this point. It's always kind of cringe, but she's trying to take a bigger, more public role right now. There's the money reason for keeping her on the ticket. I can't imagine her staying at the bottom of the ticket. That'd be really weird. But there's a case for, if they're going to switch it to her, they have reason for Biden to formally, he can call it retire instead of resign. Say, I'm retiring. He retires. And then the Democrats get to claim they had the first woman president. She might be the Kim Campbell of America.
I could see it because, again, if they're making the case that he's unfit to be a candidate, the case is equally valid. Then he should not be in the presidential role. And she is technically the person who's supposed to fill it in that circumstance. It also, hey, it's only 6 months. It knocks off some nice check boxes. It makes some history, and it gets her out of their hair while they worry about who the actual incoming longer-term president, vice president potentially could be as candidate.
But if they do set her up, she is going to be a potential for the top of the ticket. The Democrats don't seem enthused about it because she's so unpopular. But
she's weird, and she's not that bright.
She's very weird. She's very not bright. But at least she's not senile.
No, she's still got her cognitive ability. There's a whole hornet's nest of scenarios now that they've got to look at. Even if it was tactical to take out Joe, that's fine. But now you've got a spider web.
I don't think he resigns as president to let her become president unless she's going to be the Democratic candidate, because then she has the power of incumbency. She is Madam President at that point. And you really, some Americans will not want their first woman president to be a Kim Campbell.
No, maybe some of them will just accept we're going to let another electoral cycle go to the Republicans and just let her take the fall.
But they're not giving this as another cycle. This is Donald Trump.
No, I know.
And Donald Trump is looking for blood.
And there's other talk. Gavin Newsom's certainly sniffing around. Others are starting to think this is their chance. So, as Nigel said, Dave's desk can be very, very busy for the next
one. With Donald Trump, just one quick thing there. The attack from the president's website and his Twitter feed has been all about Donald Trump, the would-be dictator. On the night, it was, our guy didn't do very well, but Trump lies. They'll carry on with that. But now, after that court ruling which declared presidential immunity, now we're talking about a fascist state and the authoritarian. So this is the kind of tenor that it's going to have.
Okay. Well, we've taken well over half the show on justice, but it's such a fascinating topic. Yeah. And as I said, I generally don't follow U.S. politics in terribly much detail, but I can't help it now. Now it's gotten so fascinating, so much intrigue. Okay, not much of a change in our headline from pulling the plug on Biden to pulling the plug on Trudeau. So Toronto St. Paul, in the very keep of the Liberal castle fortress, is a big speck of blue now. Toronto St. Paul. I think the last time that voted Conservative was somewhere in the Paleolithic period.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I guess it was in 1984 under Mulroney, when we had a totally different configuration of politics in the country. The parties weren't even necessarily left-right in many ways. The Conservatives have no business even being competitive in a riding like that, let alone winning it. And they won it. What was his name? I talked to several conservatives after this win saying, why the hell did you guys do that? Because you've now maybe woken the Liberals up that, hey, maybe you have a problem. You don't want to wake the Liberals up to their failings. You want them to continue doing what they're doing. And a lot of senior Conservatives I talked to said, we didn't try. Like, we didn't try. We put no money into it. We didn't send the leader to it. We didn't send high-profile people to it. We just let the local campaign run its thing and do its thing. They didn't put a star candidate in, but they won it anyway. And the Liberals, I mean,
threw everything at it.
They firebombed the place like Dresden. They brought everything in. They brought the leader. They brought the deputy prime minister. They brought cabinet ministers. They threw tons of money at it. They did everything they could, and they got killed on their own turf. And we don't have too long to go into it, I guess. But I guess there's probably two main areas to look at this. What is it? One, what does it mean for the Liberal vulnerability now that if they can be beaten there, this means they can be beaten everywhere. They're now facing the potential of a 1993 style incineration. Mm-hmm. And second is, what's the political fallout within the Liberal Party and for Justin Trudeau? So let's start with the first before we get to Justin Trudeau. What this means. We'll start with you, Cory. How disastrous is it for the Liberals?
It's an outright catastrophe. I mean, they've maintained incredible loyalty in keeping the cracks from leaking in the ship and moving along and convincing themselves, even though similar, again, it's a similar situation to the South, as you said, with the parallels. I mean, you can see the signs, you can see the problems, you can see that this ship is sinking. But now the hole is just blown out and it is gushing. There's no denying anymore that not only are they in dire straits of hopes of re-election, but no matter which leader they have, but without doubt that Prime Minister Trudeau is an anchor. They have to either sync with that man. I know I'm really hitting the analogies, but or get rid of him. And they're still divided. They don't know. They're unlike Conservatives. We would have thrown them out before the last ballot was counted, whoever the leader is. Okay, that's it. But the Liberals are still navel-gazing, and I imagine Canadian support is just continuing to plummet in light of it.
So, Nigel, I want to go more to this second question to you. The Liberals are probably kicking themselves right now. And funny, no one's talked about this. Maybe this would be a good column from you. The Liberals broke the law immediately after the last election by not having a vote on adopting the Reform Act. So, most people don't know too much about this, but the Reform Act was a private member's bill brought in by a Conservative named Michael Chong. It was designed to reform how Parliament is done a bit, give some more power back to members of Parliament, and away from the centralization of the leaders' offices. And everybody, all the party leaders were opposed to this. Harper was prime minister when this happened. He was probably not too pleased about it, but the act passed nonetheless. It had a lot of watering down, and one of the watering down provisions was that its provisions within caucuses are not automatic, but that after every election, the new caucus votes on if it applies to them or not. I mean, so it was a pretty watered down bill, but you have by law to have that vote. The Liberals never had the vote on if the act applies to them. What's the most important thing that act does? It gives the caucus the right to fire the leader. And that was used for the first time during the Freedom Convoy to fire Aaron O'Toole. Aaron O'Toole started to, he had a pretty weak performance all the way around. We don't need to recount his political sins, but he was making some moves behind the scenes against certain people who ended up being leader after him. And the caucus revolted against him and they fired him. It was I mean, compare that to Alberta, where we had a drawn-out bloody fight for 2 years, but eventually Kenney did go down. Conservatives will eventually take them down if they have to. But federally, it was nice and clean and quick. It was like 24 hours. He's gone. And minimal blood on the floor as a result. The Liberals broke the law by not having that vote. They don't kind of have the power. Constitutionally, they can, but it's pretty ambiguous. How do you fire the leader of your party? But now the conversation has started. The Liberals know they're pretty doomed if they stick with Trudeau. They're probably doomed even with someone else, but maybe someone else could stem the destruction that'll come from the next election.
Well, not to sound Biden-esque, but there's a couple of points here. First of all,
let's see if you get to the third.
Yeah, well, how are we doing for time? First of all, you fire the leader by just withdrawing your support. You might recall back in the early days of the Canadian Alliance when Stockwell Day was leader, people started just saying, well, you know, I'm out of the party.
Well, they sat as a different caucus.
They sat as a different caucus. And so you had that, I think there was about 7 of them in, but they won a week, every week.
The Democratic Reform Caucus, yeah.
And there would pretty soon come a point where the Prime Minister would not have the support of enough of his caucus to keep the thing going. That's one way that you do it.
The problem is that was an opposition party against the majority government. This is a government already in a minority position. So do they vote non-confidence in their own government and trigger an election?
If they really want to fire him, they could do that. So,
okay, your next point.
So, yeah, what else you got? Yeah. So the second point would be that the people do not care. You and I, Cory, we get into the weeds of this thing, but that's not what's going to bring him down. What's going to bring him down is people who can't afford groceries, can't get a place to stay, their lives are falling apart because of the consequences of liberal policies, liberal actions, things that these men and women have done. And
sure, but that's bringing the Liberals down in the next election. But what this by-election's done is it's scared the crap out of the Liberal caucus and power brokers who are looking around saying, we're going to lose the next election now. So if you're a Liberal, you're trying to wonder how to hold on to power best. Probably not. But at this point, they're just wondering how to save the furniture. And the question is, like, is Trudeau the best to save the furniture or someone else? Well, and they don't have the gun in their hands that the Conservative caucus did to fire their leader because they didn't follow the law.
That was the third point, is that the polls that came out immediately after the by-election results were announced seemed to indicate that there was not anybody within the Liberal orbit that could do better than Mr. Trudeau at the forthcoming election. So the only way that I can see that they could force him out is to withdraw their support one by one and set as a rebel caucus.
With the goal being to what? To get a new leader?
To get to the point where there's a vote of non-confidence called, and probably by the Conservatives.
Yeah, but that doesn't save your own seat if you're a Liberal MP. I mean,
well, that's
when you've got nothing to lose anymore.
Those guys know they're toast anyway.
Well, no, but if you're a Liberal MP, I mean, you're a politician. Hope springs eternal. You got to find a way to turn it around. You got to keep your seat. And if you're a Liberal MP, is your best bet, stick with the captain, and hopefully not everyone goes down with the ship.
Well, maybe
or get someone else, and
they're trying to organize the closest thing they can get to an intervention. Some Liberal members of Parliament have been desperately calling, saying we need an emergency caucus meeting. We need to get together.
That meeting.
And Trudeau's running away, prancing off, dancing, and hiding from the entire thing.
Well, let's actually just, before you continue, let's show him what he was doing. He's not showing up in Calgary for Stampede, but he did manage to get to some Chinese event in the Toronto area or something, where he busts out his latest new dance moves. Let's roll that.
Instead of dancing, what about salsa?
So Cory,
I won't even try.
the Trudeau dances and blackface and stuff, the Indian costumes, all these. the most cringeworthy things. He stopped. I think there was an intervention fairly early on as prime minister where, you know, Gerald Butts sat him down. He's like, you can only do blackface around me, buddy. Like, you know, these dances, all these things, it's not helping you. But this is kind of a rewind to 8, 9, 10 years ago where he does this. And I got to be thinking that what's going through his mind, that he's thinking, well, grown up, mature Trudeau, if that ever existed, is not working. People want the old Trudeau. They want the young guy who danced and did these things.
Or maybe he's regressing kind of into just the shallow man he is. He's running away from responsibility by sitting with his own caucus. And he enjoys being the center of attention in those events. He's the kid who would do the cartwheel in the middle of the room at the party. He's the drunkard of the 60s who would have the lampshade on their head. He has to be there. That's why he does his goofy dances.
Your hat looks a bit like a lampshade.
Is playing king and the rest. Yeah. So, though it's a sober, terrible display I'm putting on, I think it could be a man who's just, he's given up, but he's just doing what he likes. And I got the summer of events of people adoring me, of dancing, of being an attention figure, and I'm just going to hide as far as I can from those darn stodgy politicians who want to talk to me.
So you see what Derek does here. Before he comes on the program, he reads the column that I've just released, and then he delivers this, because this is precisely what I'm saying. It's not 2015 anymore. And I remember that famous line, because it's 2015, as he was, I think, swearing in an equal number of women. Yeah, all right, so fine. If they're clever and they deserve it, good for them. I'm not sure that was always the case, but at any rate, the thing is, what worked in 2015 when you had an electorate that was comfortable and it was well disposed, and a little bored with the seriousness of the Harper approach to government. We'll give this guy a try. They're not thinking that now.
No.
They are absolutely not thinking that as they line up groceries 20% more than what they were 2 years ago. You keep hearing about the 2.9% and the 2.7%. Compound that through, and you've got a 20% increase in grocery costs. You've got the shortage of housing. People are mad, and it's not going to take them anywhere.
You know, we don't have a lot of time left, but Cory, I think we're chatting off air about why Trudeau isn't coming to Stampede. I mean, he goes to all these events across the country. He was at some obscure Chinese event.
It was in Markham. And it was,
Markham, so the Toronto area.
Asian Food Fest or something.
Sure, yeah, he goes to the Asian Food Festival, but he does come to the single largest event in Canada this year. Now, normally he flies in unannounced and goes to a kind of closed-door liberal meeting somewhere, so he can say he's been to Calgary during Stampede. Certainly doesn't show his face on the parade or anything, where it might be a downright security risk for him at this point. Yeah. But normally he'd go in and do a little closed-door event with George Chahal. I think you had a good reason off air we talked about why he's not even coming for that this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, Chahal is the lone Liberal MP in Calgary, I believe, right now. And we got Randy up in the Randys up in Edmonton. But Chahal is one of the few MPs who's outright said he's got to go. Chahal spoke up and said Trudeau has to go. We got to do something about it. So why is Justin going to come here to pad up the potential seat of a man who's calling for Trudeau's resignation? So I suspect that has a lot behind why. Well, you know, if you're not helping me, George, I'm certainly not coming out there to help you. So I think it's a bit of tit for tat.
Yeah. And
just it's the usual politics. I don't think it's going to save Chahal either, though.
Well, we don't even have time to get to our last bit here from Narjit Sajjan, the former defense minister, and the downright betrayal he committed against against Canadians and Canadian allies in Afghanistan. But we just don't have time to it because, damn, those topics were just so damn juicy. We had too much to chew on today. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And thank all of you for joining us today. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year to get unlimited access to all Western Standard content. Remember, the Western Standard is one of the very, very few media in Canada that declines to take Justin Trudeau's media bailout. We exist and do the work we do because of advertising and memberships from people like you. So if you want to continue to support the work we're doing, you want us to continue producing content like today's pipeline, make sure you go and subscribe today. Thank you very much. Hope to see you down at the Calgary Stampede. And God bless. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access.